is Teresa Yanaros at Divine Frequency, and I am beyond thrilled to announce Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of beloved former President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Laura is a powerful voice in the truth movement, and her message is paramount for us to hear in order to learn about how to ascend to the next level of soul development and expand the collective consciousness. She not only exposes truths about topics within the political arena, but also teaches about soul mastery and the collective ascension of humanity. She knows the depths of the suppression of spiritual technology, including the importance of understanding our connection to our Earth Mother Gaia. Today, we are going to learn about the crucial role that each and every one of us plays in our global ascension. Laura is my role model, my sister, my teacher, and my friend. Laura, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Teresa.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about some spiritual stuff, which I'm super excited about. So can you give us a little background of your spiritual journey? When did you start researching and learning about topics like ascension and soul development and Mother Gaia?
Gosh, that started off really young. Ascension was something that came to me, when I was a kid, really. Just this window period that I was tapping into. I was getting some kind of communication, something coming through my dreams. It seemed to be from like a higher race, just kind of looking out for the way this journey might progress. Since there's all sorts of traps and diversions. But I didn't really have the terminology like, oh, ascension. I just knew, okay, there's a window period and there's something connected to stargates opening and it relates to the Venus transits. But I didn't have it like articulated like that. I saw it more like, there's a journey that needs to be taken in order to help this process. And that's the journey into the underworld, going into the dark night of the soul. Mm-hmm. But, we do that all the time on an individual level, but I really felt pulled into almost the dark night of the Gaia soul, like, going into, the mother womb energies and seeing, the exile and torture of the feminine within men and women, and how we need to empower that and bring it back, lift it out of exile. Because, if we look at the mythologies of like Persephone and Demeter, Hades abducting Persephone, it's like, well, where is he abducting her into? Well, it's like, it's called the underworld, but it's really the mother womb that some patriarchal figure is holding dominion over, like is being the controller of those energies. And the root of a lot of the imbalance on the planet is after Tiamat exploded, which was a planet in a higher harmonic universe, the Baphomet energy became the dark mother reversal that they sort of created to feed on and to utilize as the archetype of the feminine. But they would put things in front of it so that we wouldn't see the satanic connection. We might see it in the demonized versions of certain characters in mythology. We might see it in false representations of Mary Magdalene. We might see it in distortions in ancient texts like the Nag Hammadi and even the Emerald Tablets, and just all these different things that have created reversals or distortions in order to feed on the energies that we're not able to contain within ourselves because of it. Because if we were given the truth and if we were able to anchor and ground in the truth, we'd be more self-contained, we'd be more directly connected with spirit. But when we're in the distortions, where does that energy go? And so they actually have ways of harvesting the energy. And so I was aware that some kind of really gnarly journey needed to be taken in order to correct this. That involved going, into the underworld, so to speak, and recollecting these fragmented aspects. Taking that energy of the feminine that's been sort of abducted or demonized or kind of locked in her own underworld to help her to rise up in order to return it to her. And even though this is happening on a cosmic and earthly level, I think we all kind of open up our field to being conduits of this process moving through us. And the only reason that I was able to understand it, even though a lot of people are doing it, but they don't quite maybe understand it, is because I just felt like it was not so much a survival thing, but I'm like, if I don't give this a voice, I'm going to feel like I'm losing my mind. And if I don't find a way to understand it, I don't know if I'm going to get out. I don't know if I'm going to be able to emerge, because you have to move through gatekeepers. You have to face all these different dark archetypes and overlords and all these different forces that have been trying to control the feminine, that are so masterful in their trickery and in their you know, the ways that, you know, they could play on your insecurities or undermine you. It's very easy to be like, what am I doing again? I'm going into the underworld. You know, you're just, you know, in your teenage years, just trying to just go to school and, you know, function, let alone like try and manage this other story that's going on in the background. So I had to keep putting my focus on it. Like, this is what it's for. This is what it's about, so that I wouldn't lose it. And, you know, it's all of our process when we go into the dark night of the soul of being able to, you know, move away from the ego, to strip down to like the soul essence, to then, you know, unite with our higher self, so that the light and dark can work together.
Mm-hmm. You're so pointed and focused, and you have so much information. Are you pulling all of this from like all kinds of stuff that you're reading and just knowing it, and knowing that this is obviously your soul path, but are there any books that you've read in particular that have stood out to you, or where are you getting a lot of this information?
Well, a lot of it, I didn't have any books or any points of reference. I did the I Ching, like to the point where I memorized the book, and it helped me to understand, you know, the elements and nature, the receptive and the creative, and all the different hexagrams that you get sort of point to a story of, okay, you know, this is kind of like in a sort of puzzle piece kind of way, showing different segments of all this. And I'm like, well, this speaks my language. It's talking about nature. It's talking about the masculine and feminine. It's talking about the earth energies, the energies of the heavens. I'm like, okay, I can understand this. So that was my ally. Same with Tarot, and, you know, working with the archetypes. But this whole underworld thing and the energy of Sophia and Magdalene and Christ consciousness and sacred union was always really strong in me. So I started to write a book, but I'm like, okay, I kind of want like some sort of point of reference. And I knew that some of it already existed in mythology, and some of the mythologies that I probably was exposed to growing up, you know, Egyptian mythology as well. And so I just decided that, you know, I was going to put my head in that direction a little bit more, to fine tune, you know, what this was all about, because the terms that I understood it by was just global transformation. I call myself a global alchemist, you know, just going into the dark to kind of clear it out so that we can stand in our power, because if we don't, something else is. And that's patriarchy, because the feminine really holds the power within men too. But yet we're meant to be in sacred union balance. So it's not one has more power than the other, but if we can get the energy circulation back of our masculine and feminine, we empower both in different ways. So I had a roommate that I lived with when I was in my early 20s, and I was going to a clairvoyant institute, and they were helping me to see that, okay, you're not crazy, and you are on this path, but you're heavily targeted. And I just thought I had really bad karma. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why am I so messed with? And they're like, no, it's not quite that. You know, and they helped to give me a bigger picture. But then my roommate at the time, who was just kind of a college kid that I let stay in a room, was kind of on to me and what this was all about. So he would go to the bookstore and steal all these books and come home and open up his shirt, and they'd all fall to the ground. And they were all about these mythologies connected to the Venus archetype of going into the underworld and this and that. And so when I really stood back and said, yeah, well, this is what I'm doing, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, we're all doing this. We're all, you know, been put in such difficult scenarios, whether, you know, we face deep adversities or loss or heartbreak or illness or injury. We're thrown into the underworld. And that's our part of looking at all that and not giving our power away more. So really, we're all on this journey, but we get to decide along the way when adversity strikes, when we're thrown into the underworld, what do we do? Do we get closer to ourselves? Do we become empowered? Or do we give our power away more and more and more, which would be what the patriarchal agenda wants to do, which isn't just masculine. It's the agenda of control. So then I started to just really expand out into just seeing the whole collective and seeing, you know, how much we're all holding hands in this, but we just might not know, because a lot of it is unconscious, or we just slap a label on it, or we think we're depressed, or we think, you know, we're lost, or we think we don't fit in. But it's like, well, there's a deeper story here. So all I've really wanted to do, the only thing that really makes, you know, this maybe a little bit different is I just want to give that part of us a voice, because this is something we all have in common. And the more we can talk about this openly, I think the more we can begin to see the likeness that we all share, and how much every single one of us is a part of this massive transformation into ascension. And I'm just grateful that I was able to view it as such, because I came real close to losing touch with it, and it did not look good. I mean, where it was going to take me, you know, self-destructive behaviors, just that didn't really serve me, because I would begin to lose myself to the projections that were on me, or the misunderstandings, or, there's no time or room for it, or it's not practical, or like, what is this all about?
Right.
But then I'm like, I look around, I'm like, but this person's taking medication, or this person, is super unhappy. I'm like, because they're connecting into this, but it's not been given a voice. And so that's all I've ever really wanted to do, because my path is no different than anyone else. It's just, the more I think that we can talk about it like you do, and we're giving this a voice right here, I think the more people will just kind of like snap out of that projection and that overlay of the matrix program, and they can begin to say, oh my gosh, actually this isn't an issue with me or some sort of psychological dysfunction or emotional dysfunction. I'm going through massive initiations in order to become fully sovereign again.
Totally. One thing I really love about you, Laura, and something that I really resonate with, is your archetypal mind. You think in archetypes, and it allows you to pull from the larger collective. And that's something that I really connect to myself. I also read tarot, and that when I found tarot, I don't even say that I found it, I say it found me. But being able to give a name to and speak to particular archetypes helps so much, and it expands your mind, because you're able to see patterns so much more clearly in your own life, but then also the macrocosm. And it's just really interesting to be able to have those tools and there are so many of them. The tarot is just one, but the more we really seek to understand, like you're talking about, the deeper nature of reality and experience and expansion, we can really learn more about what it is that we're actually going through to make that experience that much richer.
Absolutely. Completely. It's the deeper soul story. I mean, we're passed down these dynamics from archetypal energies and mythology, but we have to understand that we're the living myth, and that all these archetypes exist within us. And when we can integrate them, when we can figure out a way to have them all get along and not be so fragmented or compartmentalized, and we recognize, oh my gosh, all those forces are within me, and we can figure out a way to harmonize them, then we send that out to the collective, and it begins to iron out the imbalances and the dysfunctions, because we inherit stuff from our parents. We are modeled that initial relationship of our parents, and we can either take it to the next level, we can either match it, or we can go even lower or in a more digressed expression of it. So we have to recognize, when we hear about these archetypes, the beauty of the tarot is that we get to see how we're relating to them, instead of just reading something thinking that it's all outside of us. Same thing with extraterrestrial life. It's a part of our multidimensional bodies. Same thing with God, goddess. I mean, that's our divine blueprint. So the more we awaken to what's within, and how it relates to what's without, and vice versa, the more connected we'll feel to everything. And we'll realize that these dark agendas and these threats and assaults really don't have anything on us when we begin to see this. Because really what they're attempting to do is to take us away from it, and to split us from ourselves and each other, and to have us only maybe identify with one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're a female, so it's either a program version of it, or we can only be like the high priestess. But what about the warrior? We have to have that warrior, and even the devil energy, that's one of the cards. And I know with you working with it, you've seen it before and show up in readings. Does that mean evil? Does that mean bad? It's how we relate to power. Mm-hmm. So we have to almost take off the projection and just see, how these energies work within us. Even the Lucifer energy. Where do we buy into false light or negative ego constructs? Because the way we win the war is by recognizing where we attached ourselves along the way to, whatever it is that they're trying to attach us to, where we might unconsciously be enabling them. Because really what they do, what any agenda does, it just infects our creative channels and our creative energy. So then we end up participating, even if we're unwillingly participating in it. We have to recognize that, we win everything. We win the war within ourselves. And the best way we can do that is to choose to come into balance and shed away all the different stuff that has gotten in our way.
You have a lot of expanded knowledge. I wanted to ask you specifically about something that you mentioned at Eclipse of Disclosure last year. You were talking about the 7 or 8 chakra system, and about how there are lots more chakras than that. And you were showing this on your presentation. It was so fascinating. I would love it if you could first describe what a chakra is to you, for my listeners. And then if you can expand a little bit for us on that concept that you were talking about of the higher chakra systems and with respect to evolution.
Yes. Well, chakras are energy centers, and, they're a part of our bodies, but they relate more, you know, to energy. So if we feel like we're in survival, and we're really worried about, you know, where the next meal is going to come from, we probably have a very open survival root chakra, which is giving us information about how to survive. And the thing is, when we open ourselves up to higher consciousness and we ground it into our root chakra, we tend to flow more. We see the synchronicities. We see how the universe supports us and takes care of us. So we don't do so well functioning in one chakra. You know, if we're in our second chakra, we're in our emotions, and, you know, we tend to be very empathic. We might take on the emotions of others. And so the thing is, you know, just like with anything, including archetypes, we want to feel whole. We want to feel like the circulation of our energy centers are flowing. We want to turn some down and maybe others up. But when we just limit it to the 7 chakra system, we end up kind of looping in it. And we don't realize that there's more, because sometimes we stop at 7. And that's okay if we do, because the 7th will help us to open up. And even if we were to limit ourselves to the 7 chakras, as long as when we open up our 7th, we're connecting directly to source, the rest are going to switch on. But if we cord somebody else for spiritual information, which isn't a bad thing in a temporary sort of way, but if we rely on something like some people do with religion, it's like they have spiritual hearts, but they're relying on a book, they're relying on the priest, they're relying, you know, on something that, you know, obviously we know with religion has an underbelly that is a little bit dangerous. Doesn't mean that that person is in agreement to it, but it means that they've maybe lost the direct connect and they're relying on that and they're kind of dependent on it. Mm-hmm. So to move past the 7 chakras is to be able to, you know, open ourselves up to a direct connection and to understand the importance of the masculine and feminine. So for example, when we look at our heart chakra, the heart chakra is what is most easily connected to astral parasites and astral entities. So when we sleep at night, it's very often the conditions of our heart that determine how much we deal with archonic energies, because we might be heartbroken. We might have given our power away because we gave somebody the benefit of the doubt that maybe wasn't a fully positive person. We may not be loving ourselves enough. We may be putting too much reliance on our outer partners. And so our heart energy is kind of the bridge. And when we start to advance ourselves into more universal love, we can download it into our 4th chakra and it changes color. So moving into our galactic chakras changes the vibration of our 7 chakras. But the reason it's so difficult is because when we start to move into the 8th and 9th and 10th, we begin to get massively psychically attacked because they want to keep us looping in the 7th. So when we start to perceive the 8th and 9th, we are already starting to integrate higher earth energies, which is ascension. And the reason why this ascension window period is so difficult is because when we start to move into that, we get slammed and a lot of people start to give up or they feel cynical. They're like, why bother? They might be feeling like they were doing all the right things and they still aren't progressing. And so they might get cynical and go back to bad habits without realizing they're getting attacked, because the 8th and 9th chakra are an infinity. It creates an infinity spiral in our energy body. And when we can start to have the infinity spiral flowing in our energy body, we start to upgrade the human vessel to more, it starts to become more of a crystalline form, and that process starts to begin. And of course, our body, our energetic body is designed to be immortal, to come and go from the physical as we please. And once we pass the 7, that starts to happen. Now we can have consciousness beyond the 7 chakras, which many of us have, but the challenge is, are we leaving our body to feel it, vacating our vessel, or are we thinking about it but not able, you know, to integrate it, and feeling the heaviness of this density? So we have to be able to move through those psychic attacks, begin to open ourselves up, and stay grounded. And a good way to do that is, you know, putting essential oils on the base of your skull, because most of us were implanted with, most of the human race was implanted with something in the base of their skull, which is where these chakras are, so that every time, like I said, we try and move into it, we get attacked, or we find ourselves bouncing back and forth between higher and lower and higher and lower. We have to bust through it. So the 8th and 9th is that infinity spiral. And then we go into 10, 11, 12, which is the avatar consciousness, which was the consciousness held in the Lyran system, where the first life forms were seated. And the avatar consciousness is really powerful. But the reason, you know, that system got attacked by reptilian energies is because the differentiation of the masculine and feminine began to separate us more and more from the mother. So that's why the 13th gate starts to come in. And when we go into 13, we're going into the core of the planet and Mother Earth, who links to 0 point energy. So to have our 12 strands back is something that we're going to experience on a physical level, as long as when our consciousness can perceive it, we begin to ground it and anchor it. Like some of those posts I've been doing, like, okay, we got to take this and make it a way of life. And then, you know, really connecting with the Mother Earth, because that's going to protect us from further attack. We got vulnerable when we started to lose that original balance. And then we were still able to embody 12 strand, but we are very easily manipulated, hybridized, and we began to steer further and further away from the goal. And then our DNA started to digress. And the lower entities that hold these control agendas have 10 strand DNA, that's draconian, and 11 strand, which is the negative factions of the Anunnaki. And they're trying to keep us from being able to get to the 12, because the 12 is Christ consciousness that naturally wants to connect with the Mother. But
so can I ask a really quick question?
Of course.
So how do you actually, you've described a little bit about what the 8th level and the 9th level look like, and that was an amazing explanation. You were talking about the infinity spiral, but how do you actually get there? Where is that located? Is it like above our heads, or and how do we connect to that energy, and how do we actually begin to open up those higher chakra systems?
Its base of our skull is where I believe the 8th is, and then okay, it spirals kind of like around our head and kind of above our head, but like it links to like around our head. I can, if anybody's interested and they want to email me, I'll send you a diagram of what it looks like. And one's called the mouth of God, and the other one's the permanent seed atom. And it's this whole process of moving into a higher level of sacred union. So if we get really confused about it all, like how do we do this? And, you know, and what's been the targeting, it's really been attacking this synthesis of our DNA, because in our DNA is the love story of sacred union, but it's at different levels. So when we healed the 6th and 7th, which relate to the Michael and Mary ley lines that got impacted, because the ley lines and the stargates relate to our DNA and our energy meridians and our chakras, we're a direct replica of it. So when we think about archonic energies and dark agendas manipulating it, it in turn manipulates our energy bodies. So for us to be able to move past it, we got to look at our relationships. You know, where do we hit roadblocks within ourselves and with our partners and with our friendships? Where do we find ourselves going into conflict? What are the conditions that cause it? Is there main themes in our lives that we can look at? Is it some childhood wound? The great thing about the 13th gate and the 13th sign of Fiacus, which the sun has been moving into, is that it's ruled by the asteroid Chiron. So the key to starting to activate your galactic chakras, excuse me, I'm gonna move, has to do with looking at our wounds, because that's where we're stopped in our tracks. That's why trauma has been the main goal, to create trauma from these darker agendas. World wars, you know, here we have distortions of the masculine and feminine. So there's divorce, there's heartbreak, there's all these things that traumatize us. There's abuse, you know, and then we see it concentrated versions of like pedophilia rings and all sorts of really heinous things. The trauma-based mind control, you know, is also like a more concentrated example. So when we look at the conditions of our life, it'll give us everything we need to be able to step back and sort of assess it. You know, what keeps coming up again and again that stops you in your tracks or creates conflict, and what comes from others that, you know, triggers you and upsets you. You know, is there a way to harmonize this? Is there a way to work through it? And if not, you know, you almost have to give yourself the permission to move on, because that's going to keep you stuck. You know, same with self-destructive behaviors, where instead of doing something healing for yourself, you do something toxic. You know, you engage in toxic substances or activities that might be a little out of balance. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, we need to stop everything, but how can we do it in a way that's not detrimental? So all the information we need is in our life story and our life experience. If we can, you know, work with it as a tool to help us to grow. And that's how we're going to activate our galactic chakras. But if we find ourselves, you know, moving along in life and everything feels great, and then all of a sudden we feel slammed, we don't necessarily want to create blame or judgment on the situation. We want to consider that it's one of those attacks. But we don't want to always say, well, I'm just being attacked, and not look at, okay, what did they get in on? Where's our vulnerability? So it's sort of a process of looking at both what are your inner wounds, and when everything's good, what do you feel is the sabotager, and is it feeding on something in yourself or others, and just to be sort of hyper aware. But yeah, so essential oils can help, and just, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then when we start to move into our avatar consciousness, those chakras aren't exactly where we think. Like the 13th is right below our feet. The 15th is like in hyperspace that we link to through the 13th gate, through the mother. And that's why Isis collects Osiris's parts. I mean, there's mythologies that tell these stories, but yet we're also connecting with the fragmented aspects of the goddess consciousness that has been fed on with the reversals, which was the Baphomet I mentioned.
Can you tell us, it's interesting that Isis is coming up, because I'm writing my second book right now, and I'm learning a lot about Isis right now. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the archetype of Isis and how she fits into all of this?
Yeah, well, gosh, Isis is like a title. I mean, there's the Isis Sophia, there's the Isis Magdalene's been associated with, there's the Isis in Egypt. I mean, it's the universal mother goddess. That title doesn't necessarily need to stretch out beyond the one that we can identify with in Egypt, or else it might get confusing to people. But it's sort of like the Christ energy, you know, goes beyond just Yeshua. Yeah, I mean, it's the mother principle. And the thing is, when we look at Ophiuchus, I would say that that associates with Isis, because right opposite it in the sky is Osiris Orion. And that balance is coming back. So, you know, just as much as there's been the fragmented feminine, there's been the fragmented male, and Osiris, you know, Isis collects the pieces of Osiris. And so in a lot of ways, the feminine, even though she's been exiled, has been trying to heal the divine masculine to help gather his parts and bring it back. So, I mean, you know, we're talking Alpha Omega, we're talking, you know, the mother womb of creation, you know, related also to the Sophia energy. And it's almost like, you know, these sister energies branched out from source, playing different roles of the goddess to take care of, you know, important things throughout history. So all these different archetypes come from the same mother goddess, but they have different parts to play in order to complete the process of reconnecting to humanity to nurture our growth into, you know, ascension. So I haven't touched upon Isis for quite some time, and I used to, you know, be a lot more well-versed in all of it. But, you know, I mean, she's, you know, called the giver of life, and, you know, there's powerful archetypal properties there that we can connect with when we look at our own masculine side. And the more we study these mythologies, the more we can relate to our own soul architecture. And Isis and Ra and Horus and Set are very similar mythologies to, you know, that dark character that always shows up, whether that's Hades or what we see in Sumerian mythology. You know, we have Enki and Enlil. We have these two brothers all the time, you know, Enki and Enlil, Osiris and Set. You know, there's something about that dualistic nature of the masculine that also relates to Christ Lucifer. So how can we integrate that? And so the goddess energy, you know, is the ultimate mother that carries this in her womb as almost one being and births them as two. And then as a humanity, we need to decide how to collect these fragmented aspects so it's not, you know, separate from each other. And the goddess energy, you know, is the ultimate mother to nurture everything back home so that we can feel that oneness, like we're inside of her womb again, ready to rebirth in wholeness out of that fragmentation, if that makes any sense.
It does. Can you tell us about the wounded healer?
The wounded healer is Chiron. The wounded healer is basically where we feel in our lives that we can be very helpful to others, but we can't help ourselves in the same way. Like we might have a wonderful healing gift that we, you know, want to share, or we have a lot of wisdom and truth that we can share, but sometimes it's very difficult to integrate it into our own life because through our own wounds, we're able to have that compassion and sensitivity to others. And we can see that in others, and we can, you know, extend our heart to others, but it's hard to do it for ourselves because we're still dealing with that wound. So when we meet other wounded healers, they can give us back something, or, you know, we can all share, which is what we're doing right now on the planet. And because it's associated with the mother energy and the 13th sign, which is an Isis Sophia energy, I like to put those two together just because, you know, when we look at mother goddess, it is one cosmic mother with different, you know, aspects of herself. Chiron, you know, gives us a chance to recognize that for us to thrive, we have to look at where we've been wounded. We have to look at the fact that the biggest wound we have is separation from the mother. I mean, if we were born and yanked away from our mother right away, we're going to carry those wounds throughout our life. If we separate from ourselves on any level, we feel wounded. If somebody abused us to the point where we feel a disconnect, we feel wounded. So, you know, the mother energy has been wounded in the sense that she feels she lost her children. And children feel wounded. Our children, us as children, feel wounded because we lost our mother, but yet we have the mother and the child within us, and the father and the daughter and the son. So the wounded healer gives us a chance to look at all these different parts of ourselves to see which has been wounded. So when we look at an astrological chart and we see where Chiron is, dependent on what house it's in and what sign it's in, it's going to give us an idea of what part of that soul architecture are you working on healing. It might be a masculine energy if you're a woman. It might be a feminine energy if you're a woman, based on how it appears in the chart, even though it's all contained in one vessel. So like, for example, if you have Chiron and Aries in the 5th house, it might be a wounded ego because it's Aries, which is ruled by Mars, in the 5th house, which is the house of Leo, which might be creativity. So when you're a child and you try to assert yourself and be a creative being, assertion, meaning the Mars energy, and that was wounded, you might feel like in life you never really got a chance to paint or draw, or every time you did, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't hung up on the refrigerator at home. You know, if you have a wounded 9th house, which is the house of higher self in Scorpio, you might feel a disconnect from your sexual energy because you forget that it's also spiritual energy. You might have been invalidated as a kid for your higher awareness, and you might feel wounded in that department, and also confused about how sexual energy and spiritual energy are connected. And you might be one of the big healers to reintegrate love and, you know, understanding sacred sexuality. So the very thing we're wounded in is the one thing that we can master. So that kid that might have that Aries Chiron in the 5th house might become a great artist one day, but it might be a late bloomer because it was denied this whole time. Same with the other ones. But you might be able to appreciate everybody else's art and music and enjoy it without being able to give yourself the permission to go in that direction. So the healing of the wounded healer is taking the biggest wound and saying, I can make this my purpose and mission to develop, to step into, to give myself permission to face that wound head on and reclaim it, because we're very often wounded in the greatest places that we hold gifts.
I love how you are taking the archetypes that people move through in their soul development and then teaching people how to heal those archetypes. That's so important. So I'm going to plug really quickly. For those of you who don't follow Laura on Facebook, she posts all the time, all this amazing content. I try to post some of it through Divine Frequency so that it's accessible to you guys. And just please follow her on Facebook, because she talks a lot about this healing stuff that we need so that we can heal. Where I'd love to go next, Laura, is I'd love to ask you about Ascension and Mother Gaia. So can you tell us a little bit about like the current status of where you believe we are on the planet with respect to evolution and ascension?
Yes, well, the ascension window period, as far as the stellar activation cycle goes, is basically from years 2000 to 2017, but that's not the end of the ascension cycle. It just shifts. So we're moving from gaining knowledge, having a deeper understanding of truth, to becoming more embodied. Because the thing is, we can't just stay in our heads, but yet we still need to share information. But with this knowledge, with this information, what can we do with it? We need to, you know, step into the embodiment of it. So the vibration of the planet is changing as far as the sacred geometries are concerned. And, you know, there's a lot that I present about that sort of describes these different geometries and how the aura of the planet looks in this ascension. But we're moving into like this whole other level in this particular time that, you know, we can embody. So when we think of the word like Merkaba and how we advance ourselves on a physical level, you know, we're moving from the carbon base to the crystalline. So we've gained the knowledge to understand what this carbon density has been about and why we've been limited in the carbon density. And so after 2017, it's like, okay, now we're ready for the real physical transformation to really start to open up our galactic chakras. The first step is, you know, understanding and perceiving the information, because energy and thoughts, you know, play a huge part in what our physical bodies are capable of doing, which is the root of why we might ever get sick or have some sort of disease. And so when embodiment happens, it's when spirit starts to hold dominion over matter. And in this process of alchemy and having the reversals corrected, which we're all still in the process of doing, and having the dodecahedron, which is connected to the ether, which is connected to the mother, available to us as the sun is able to move through the 13th sign, we're able to get those activations. And when we get the ether element back, the reversal of the pentagram is able to come upright, which means that we're more easily in alignment with source energy coming through us to purify our elements. It's always been there, but the planetary body, because of all the cataclysms in our ancient history, was thrown off of that alignment. So we could only really perceive it from the inside. That's why the underworld had a lot to do with finding the light on the inside. Now it's more available with a direct connection versus knowing that it's there and having to search for it. Now it's a lot easier for those that might not be able to wrap their heads around the information to get a direct activation. And so we've completed that first stage. And so in the second stage, I think we'll find people waking up to just the spiritual inheritance, and then they can catch up with the information. But the challenge is that transhumanism and these dark agendas are doing all that they can to steer people and distract them away from what's available. So ascension isn't something that we have to strategize or try and figure out, or are we going to make it or not make it? It's simply allowing yourself to be in alignment and to make yourself available to what already is, and be very discerning of the things that take you away from that, because it's a very organic process. It's happening cosmically. It's happening in the earth body. It's already a done deal. But how can we make ourselves present enough to begin to knock out the stuff that clogs us, blocks our energy centers, and keeps us in, a lower frame of mind where we're programmed. And programming is what makes us toxic to things like chemtrails. And it doesn't allow us to assimilate the assaults that are coming in. So when we can step in alignment with the ascension energies, we are able to then neutralize the effects of some of these attacks and assaults. But if we stay in a programming, if we stay in the low density form of thinking and behaving, we're very vulnerable to the things that are attacking us. So we're at this crossroads, and when we step into more embodiment, we're more protected. And when we allow ourselves to be distracted, even if we understand conspiracy, we got to watch out, because it's a time of, really being our divine sovereign selves, and maybe saying to ourselves, I get it enough to be able to move in this direction confidently. And those that aren't ready, they'll catch up with some of the information that might help inspire, or just simply walking outside barefoot or sitting against a tree and really breathing in the energies will begin to give you more access to the downloads. Because there's always going to be artificial intelligence signals or organic ascension signals. And based on the quality of our relationship with ourselves, will help us to stay on track with the ones that will really, help us advance.
Wow. Thank you so much, Laura, for all of this incredible information. I cannot wait to watch this back 80 times because you're just so full of so much information. I just love you so much.
I love you so much.
Thank you for being on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be speaking at New Living Expo?
I'll be talking about the new divine human in this paradigm, the new paradigm divine human. A lot of it is, things that we've touched upon. How our energy bodies relate to the earth grids, really what we're made of, and the process of alchemy on a soul level, and how that links to the greater macro picture. I'll be talking about archetypes. I'll be talking about the galactic zodiac, the nature of the stargates, and just a lot about, what this next cycle is about, some of the astrological alignments. And then let's see, the other talk is about disclosure and how we can help humanity rehabilitate from the shock of, discovering these crimes against humanity, on top of the fact that there's a lot that humanity is working on healing based on just the experiences they've had as a human. So, really looking at the energies of disclosure and what part we can play to assist in the rehabilitation, the importance of, being sovereign as a prerequisite to unity consciousness. Yeah. And how we can, really best serve humanity. It'll be going into much more detail. I haven't even seen what I'm talking about in front of me for some time, but yeah, it'll be disclosure, which we discussed a little bit of, and then energies related to Gaia Sophia. So it's very much similar to what's been presented here, but in real in-depth detail with PowerPoint presentation so you can see some displays of, some charts of pictures that show us the energy body and things like the infinity spiral.
Wow,
to give people more of a image in a picture.
Awesome. Well, we wish you luck. Your presentations are amazing. I had so much fun at Eclipse of Disclosure last year, and I can't wait to see you at Contact in the Desert in just a couple months.
I really look forward to it. I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Laura. Everyone, this is Laura Eisenhower. You can follow her on Facebook, and she's got a lot of great content, so check her out. And thank you so much for being on the show, and I can't wait to see you in a couple months.
I can't wait to. Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.